Hello and welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad Tehami. In today's program, we are going to talk about the fifth phase of India's general elections for 543 seats of the Lok Sabha, or the lower house of the parliament in India. Around 89.5 million people were eligible to cast their votes today in the fifth phase for 49 out of those 543 total seats for the Lok Sabha. 695 candidates were vying to get elected on these particular seats. Now, the sixth phase of the polls will be held on May the 25th, while the seventh and the final phase of the polling will be held on June the 1st. The total vote count will be subsequently happening on June the 4th. Earlier, the four phases happened on respectively on April the 19th, April the 26th, May the 7th, and May the 13th. Now, during these polls, there are two major alliances which are facing off each other. The first is the National Democratic Alliance, that is, of course, led by ruling Bharatiya Janata Party, and the other one is the alliance of 26 political parties, that is known as India, led by Indian National Congress. Also, now the Bharatiya Janata Party is, of course, eyeing for a victory for a consecutive third term, and it seems pretty confident this time around that it delivered to the promises that it made back in 2019 to the general public over there in India, and capitalizing on fulfillment of all those promises. It is eyeing and seems pretty confident to get that victory this time around as well. And at the same time, we have seen during the election campaign, its narrative was on building rhetoric that was anti-Muslim, anti-Pakistan, and also anti-China. Some provocative and irresponsible statements in the recent past also we have seen coming from the top leadership of Bharatiya Janata Party, especially targeting Pakistan. And there has been some response when we talk about Pakistan's Foreign Office regarding those irresponsible statements. We'll also be taking analysis regarding those statements also. And specifically in today's voting, what had been the turnout this time around, and how can we compare this particular turnout with the earlier held phases of the voting? What do opinion polls this time around say? And when we talk about Bharatiya Janata Party's anti-Pakistan and anti-Muslim rhetoric, what does that basically depict? Is there any sort of a chance when you talk about Indian National Congress and the alliance it is part of, giving any sort of a surprise to Bharatiya Janata Party and the alliance that it is leading? Also, another interesting aspect in today's phase was the case of Ladakh. The voting happened in that only constituency in Ladakh also, especially in the wake of the actions of the Indian government in 2019. We'll also be talking about the case of Ladakh, and we'll also be talking about the manifestos of the leading parties. What had been the major promises in those manifestos, and what are the major problems India is actually faced with, and which of the manifesto actually deals with those concerns and the problems of the general Indians. And when we talk about Bharatiya Janata Party's confidence regarding the victory in this particular election, also what are going to be the ramifications as far as the regional peace stability is concerned, what sort of an impact it might have on the fate of the innocent people in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, also its impact on any sort of or any sort of a chance when you talk about the resolution of the disputes between Pakistan and India. All those matters are for discussion in today's show. We are honored to have been joined in the studio by Dr. Awais Bin Wasi, he is Indian Affairs expert. Dr. Wasi, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. We really appreciate that. Also in the studio, we are honored to have been joined by Mr. Altaf Hussain Wani, he is chairman of the Kashmir Institute of International Relations. Mr. Wani, thank you very much for your time also, for being with us on the show tonight. We really appreciate that. On Skype at the same time, we are honored to have been joined by Mr. P.J Mir, senior journalist. Mr. Mir, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Let me begin with you, Dr. Wasi. Today's voting. Now, as far as the climatic temperature is concerned, it is quite high in the South Asian region. It was also being said that with the passage of time, as the polling is underway in India, because of that climatic temperature turning high with the passage of time, the voter turnout might reduce. So what about today's voter turnout? Was there a significant impact of the rising temperature physically on the voter turnout during today's polling?
I think that both this climate, as you are referring, and the political climate, both played their role in terms of the turnout, because now you must have seen the statements of Election Commission of India that given the low turnout in the previous 4 phases of elections, now they are requesting, they are appealing the larger popular electorate that they come out and they poll votes. So I don't think that the same pattern of the low voter turnout maybe that continues, and in order to raise that temperature, we must have recently seen the provocative statements of BJP's leadership.
Okay, so we'll talk about those provocative statements which come from the Bharatiya Janata Party leadership. Now, specifically talking about the low turnout, you've already referred to the Indian Election Commission. Earlier in the 4 phases of this particular polling that have already happened, there was a low turnout as compared to the previous elections back in 2019. And do you understand any core reason associated with that low turnout?
I think that the reason is
for sure it's not, it doesn't has to deal with the climatic temperature rise.
Yes, exactly. It means that the participation of the people and their trust on the institutions that has been to a larger extent that has been eroded, and their disinterest and lack of interest that demonstrate this low turnout. And also if you see that even percentage in 2019 elections, the total voter percentage which BJP got, that was 38%, and in previous election 2014 the percentage was 31%. So keeping in view these past 2 Lok Sabha elections, so there is a clear indication that this downward trend of the that voter turnout that continues. And this election campaign which BJP tries to raise to a certain level, and in which maximum participation could be ensured, that could not be seen so far. That is why that we are seeing the persistent statement by the Election Commission of India.
Mr. Wani, what's your understanding of the 5 phases that have happened so far regarding the voter turnout, and if the voter turnout this time around as compared to back in 2019 was lower, as per your understanding, what are the core reasons for that?
See, the first and foremost reason was that the government and overall the politicians have not met the expectations of the electorate. That's one. The rising unemployment in India, and to start with, we have already discussed it, BJP started its election campaign with the mantra of that development. But slowly and steadily, then when they saw in the first phase of elections low voting turnout and the projections were against BJP, then BJP reversed its gear again to the hate speech against Pakistan and against minorities, Muslims and Muslim rulers of the past, and so on and so forth. And slowly and gradually it gathered pace in its statements, from the Narendra Singh Modi to all other BJP leaders calling for that the Congress will give everything to the Muslims and all that, the Muslims will take away everything from you. And in order to, going back to the past track, what they sold in 2014 and what in 2019. The same pattern they are running this election campaign. The basic cause that when the people saw that BJP on the first phases, BJP was not able to get its electorate out. That was the first reason for this low turnout, and that first phase was mainly in the south, and so BJP had that problem also in that place. Slowly and gradually, when we saw the BJP facing all these problems in the north too, Overall, when we analyze all this lower, though it was not that lower percentage of voting, it was, we can compare it from 19, it was low, but it was not that low turnout. But BJP has been trying to get people out, but she has failed in order to sell its mantra of what we called this against minorities, against Muslims and all that, which they have been telling to people. On the contrary, the voter of the Congress, which is a literate one voter, which is committed voter to the Congress, and that BJP got in 2 elections, they got the swing vote. The swing vote of the uneducated people in India, those again in the north, they have the farmers crisis and other crises. That is why we see that low turnout in those phases as compared to 2019.
Right. Mr. Mir, what's your understanding when you talk about this time the polls are happening in India? It is being considered as one of the world's largest democratic exercises in history. How do you compare what happened basically back in 2014 and back in 2019, which led the Bharatiya Janata Party come into power for 2 consecutive terms? Do you also see that BJP being confident this time around, eyeing for the 3rd consecutive victory? Is there any chance that it would be taking the lead this time around and govern India for the 3rd consecutive term?
Well, the chances look pretty bright at the moment, but don't forget, BJP has always encashed, as what Mr. Wani has indicated, they have encashed on Pakistan, they have encashed on basically their stand against the Muslims. There are 25% of Muslims which are there, and yet they cannot, as what Mr. Wani was saying, you can't get a job as a Muslim in India. They themselves have, come out with these statements. Their own journalists, they've come out. So there is a lot of hatred which has been, thrown in by this particular party. And because of this, there is a perception that I always, Jawad, compare, like in Israel, there are 2 people. One are the Zionists and one are the Jews. The Jews are much better than the Zionists, and they are now supporting basically the Palestinians for the genocide which has been committed there. And here in India, we have a terrorist group which is governing India, and then we have the good Indians. I mean, we cannot say that the entire Indians are all, bad. But this group of bandits, which is basically, again, trying to come back into power, are again, basically, they have indoctrinated the people. Look what they have done to the Dalits. Do you know the Dalits are now have gone into full-time prostitution because they cannot get any jobs. And because of that, there are other minorities who cannot get into the, in the top up front of, in the corporate affairs and other companies. So this something is, as what you indicated earlier, I think this is probably one of the reasons that there is a low turnout. And yes, there is a lot of dissent, lot of I'd say, discrimination which is going on in India. Yet we all sit down and say one of the biggest democracies. There is no democracy there except democracy. That is what it is. It saddens me to say time and again that, here we do cry for Palestine, we cry for everybody else, but we do not give that much of an importance as Pakistan to the Kashmiri cause. I think we should be, pushing India right up back front all over the world to let the world know what they have done to Kashmir. But that is sadly one of our biggest mistakes. We go up front, then we go 3 steps backward. So India, basically, in the meantime, they come along and cash everything. So this is something which needs to be addressed. But in these elections, well, the 7th phase is going to be taking place in, let's say, as you mentioned, on the 1st of June. Well, there are monsoons coming. We don't know what how terrible they are or what will be the intensity of those. But yes, I don't expect a lot of turnout as far as these elections are concerned, because in my opinion, they're not really elections. They are, again, elections just for this terrorist band. And why I use this harsh word is because what we have seen, the atrocities being committed by the indigenous movements of the, the Tamils, of the Nagas, of the Mizus, of the, Assam, of the Kashmiris, the Khalistan movement, all of them. So, how can you have fair elections in the light of such discriminations within their own country. So they are going to be debatable. And if Mr. Modi does come in, I think let's see, because his hawks are all speaking, and spitting, all kinds of, venomosity against the Muslims. Yet Mr. Modi says, "Oh, people are trying to compare me that I'm discriminating between Muslims. How can they do that?" Well, Mr. Modi, 2006 in Gujarat, we all know what happens then. What happened then, and we all know what's happening now. Although you might try to whitewash all your political, campaigns, but at the end of the day, BJP, if it comes back into power, that will not be India, but that will be a forced India. That's how I perceive it to be.
Right, Mr. Mir, you already started your take with there are pretty high chances of Bharatiya Janata Party taking victory this time around, but based on the politics of hatred and the kind of discrimination it is meted out to other minorities, even to Dalits that happen to be Hindus. Now, given the fact there's been so much talk about during the tenure of Bharatiya Janata Party, there's been talk of rising unemployment, a rise in inflation. As a voter, I just want to understand that very perception when a voter goes to vote for a certain political party, the narrative or the rhetoric it has built is based on hate, specifically directed towards a certain community which belongs to minority, or would a voter consider what this particular party did for us in the last 10 years and what does its manifesto say this time around, what it is going to offer us in the next 5 years? So which one of these two elements supersede or take more weight when we compare the weight of the equation? On one side, the hate speech driven vote, or that vote which is based on the analysis of the ground realities and the delivery which a certain political party has been able to do or not?
Well, Jawad, I had an opportunity of speaking to, Mrs. Gandhi, and I found them to be fairly liberal in comparison to the BJP. I mean, BJP are hardliners, and they're one of those who work indirectly into genocide, whether politically or otherwise. So, to your question, I feel that BJP, you vote against them, they've got hordes of gangsters who go along and beat the voters up. We've seen it. It's on the net and it's on the social media. So we've seen all of that. Whereas, in comparison to your question, will the people change? I doubt it. I very much doubt it, because there's so much of poverty which we do not see. As far as PR is concerned, we don't really see that. In the mainstream Indian sort of media, because they don't show it. And if you do show it, well, there's hard times with the Indian media. I've experienced it in one of my shows. One of my the participants, I think it was Brigadier Ghazanfar, he spoke something against Narendra Modi, and in the break they came along and said, "Sir, please don't go so hard on Narendra Modi, because there are chances they'll close our television up." So that's the intensity which they carry. So you will not see the real side of India on the Indian media. It is all controlled. And as far as I think, again, reverting back to your question, if Indian National Congress, if they come up, or at least they have some sort of a majority where they can compete and have a firm dialogue in the Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha, I think that is where there might be perhaps some sort of a change. But otherwise, at this present moment, what we are seeing, I can't quote, there's somebody pretty important in India who has indicated that, BJP will, win the elections. So if that happens, well, and that person is pretty much entwined with the UAE, and they've got future, plans coming up. So BJP and India, basically, I foresee them to come up. But again, who's going to oppose them? Who's going to oppose them? Because there's a lot of violence and there's a lot of gangsterism which is going on in India, as you've seen it in Kashmir. You've seen it as, as open as it comes. So we get a lot of Sikhs here coming into Pakistan, and they tell us stories, from across the border. We get Sikhs coming into London, and they tell us stories about, what's going on there. So it is going to be a hard battle. It's going to be a very tough battle, but again, that remains to be seen. As I say, it's a developing story. Let's see till the seventh pillar, what happens then.
Right, Dr. Wasi, what are the major problems India has been faced with, especially during the last tenure of Bharatiya Janata Party, and what had Bharatiya Janata Party done specifically to address those problems and challenges?
The major problem which India currently is facing, and it has, continuously for the last decade, that is the clear departure from the constitutional provisions, what Indian Constitution says, and what for the last 10 years, what is happening in India, that is something which is diametrically opposite to each other. This is number one. And if we go into the details, if you see that in democracy and pluralism, where voices of other communities and it should be reflected, and there should be a broader representation of that. So what to talk of a representation, they are Modi regime, they try to eliminate them, they try to exterminate them. For example, the largest minority, if you see that how what kind of treatment that they have meted out to them. This is number one. Second thing is that this Hindutva construct, as rightly pointed out by Mir Sahib, that it has nothing to do with Hinduism. It's a political construct, and based to advance that discourse of hatred, and especially in the hinterland and Hindi belt of India, which BJP is doing it. And BJP in fact polarized and widened the gap within India.
So the same question, when it comes to this particular political construct, as you say it, Hindutva, on the basis of which the Bharatiya Janata Party spreads hate against Muslims, its leadership passes out the provocative and irresponsible statements about Pakistan as well as about China. Now, when we talk about the psychology of the voter, is hate more important for him or her while casting the vote, or the ground realities, for example, the poverty, unemployment, inflation, are those the most important elements to be considered while voting?
Exactly, that ideally the basic issues, the basic amenities of the people, that should have been the priority. But what is happening in India, if you see...
So that makes me curious, how, if that happens to be a priority, and naturally that should be a priority for a certain citizen who is going to vote, why would he vote on the basis of that particular narrative that has been built by a political party to vote it and get nothing at the end of the day in return when it comes to power?
When in the beginning of this election, BJP tries to sell the same slogans of, which might be appealing to the larger and populist electorate. But what happens that the whole India, we cannot take it, in a single way. For example, that those provocative and emotional, those slogans, they have more buyers in Hindi belt. Okay, that is why these slogans are being advanced and being propagated by BJP leadership. If you see, for example, that in the beginning, in the first phase of the election, so this anti-Pakistan rhetoric, anti-Muslim rhetoric, and Hindutva rhetoric, that was not there. But in the upcoming phases, even if you see this fifth phase, again in the last election 2009 was the watershed moment, was the Balakot incident and how they have exploited it. Now in the same recent speech, Prime Minister Modi, through a veiled reference, he mentioned it, that if earlier their predecessor or their previous governments, when any terrorist incident, any terrorist attack happened, so they were sending doziers, and we are the ones that we are hitting the targets within their homes, right? So this is the clear reference of Balakot incident of 2019. So now the question arises that what compelled bring up this reference. In fact, that is being used to provoke the voters and to engage them so that they can have the required number of seats and they can move towards the clinching the victory. So if you see it, this factor, this hate factor, it significantly played an important role in the BJP's discourse, and that is the populist discourse which is being bought in the ground. That is, happening in India.
Right, Mr. Wani, when we talk about the oversight body of the elections, of course, the Election Commission of India, isn't there any code of conduct for the political parties when it is going into the political campaign before the elections or during the elections or during various phases of the elections? Is there any specific code that deals or addresses with the hate speech or holds any political party accountable in turn if it resorts or its slogans or its statements coming from the top leadership actually pinpoint and specifically talk about a certain discriminatory measure? For example, let's bring in certain promises which have been made by Prime Minister Narendra Modi that specifically talk about Congress will take your Mangala Sutra or your buffalo or your gold and give it to Kuspatiya, to those who have more kids, referring to Muslims to its vote bank. Again, similar sort of a statement. Congress will change the constitution and rob you of reservation and give it to Muslims. Right? Modi, on the other hand, will be the chowkidar for the rights of the deprived. Likewise, you go on and on and on. Congress will make Hindus second-class citizens. Opposition leaders did not attend the Ram Temple inauguration ceremony. Women have suffered and the police did not act because the name of the tormentor was again a Muslim he is referring to. And then there is a government that takes a fight into enemy territory, perhaps this time around referring to China. India is winning recognition abroad. Now, the 4 or 5 things that I've already mentioned, they directly or indirectly refer to a certain community. Isn't there any code of conduct? And what does that basically say?
You see, there is a code of conduct that nobody can speak like this. But over the period of time, we have seen the BJP has there's an infection in all the organs of the government in India now of this Hindutva brigade, which P.J Mir was talking about, that this elite which is ruling the country this time, they have we have never seen provocative statements against the people of Kashmir, even when we were fighting the Indian army and they were fighting, but there was no provocative statement from any of the chiefs of the India. They would say always it's a political matter, the government should solve it. But as soon as BJP came in, we saw that the former chief of staff who said we will change the DNA of the Kashmiris. This was a provocative statement. And similarly, you could see in the judiciary what the Indian judiciary is now doing. Each and every organ of the government is towing the policies of the BJP. You can see the sitting chief minister of Delhi was arrested. He was not granted bail until the election phase was very much nearer. He was debarred to canvass the election campaign in his territory. And likewise, the Congress and others, their funds were confiscated and they were not allowed to use those funds. This is what the BJP is doing in India, and this is what the election is. All this is going under the nose of Election Commission of India, which from 1977 onwards, always people say that South India has a very fair election commission. The elections are always free and fair in India. But BJP has taken each and everything. So the election commission, the appointments of election commission, even the appointments of, recently we have seen that India's National Human Rights Commission's rating in Global Human Rights Commission has been downgraded and extended 1 more year. And the reason for that is that all those people serving as BJP, their purposes, they were inducted in that Human Rights Commission. They were given the jobs when they were sitting Supreme Court judges, when they were sitting High Court judges, and they issued all the judgments in favor of BJP, in favor of Hindutva, and that's why they were made the members of the Indian Human Rights Commission. So This is how BJP is running. Now you say, what they say, we have reached the moon, we saw this and that. It was to start with. Narendra Modi started with this. But moon and international recognition did not give them anything. Because the common masses in India, which I already said in the Hindi belt, the farmers' agitation and then the Thakurs, they're resisting, Rajputs resisting against Modi and all that. He then told again that hatred on which they won the earlier elections. So for the BJP, be it army, be it judiciary, be it the Indian any of the election commission, they have been taken over by this Hindutva brigade, by these ideologies.
When the oversight body for this, then we'll consider it the so-called largest democratic exercise happening in the world's history.
It is not we are telling it. It is what the international think tanks are telling, that India's departure from democracy, they are no more a democracy now, they are a theocracy.
A point very well raised. It is not we who are raising the questions on the credibility of the election commission.
We.
If it is towing, it is running on the lines of that particular agenda of Bharatiya Janata Party. It is other state organs, institutions within India also. But it is the international think tanks, the human rights organizations also raising the questions. So after the conclusion of the last phase of these elections, don't you think the transparency in this particular election would come under scrutiny of the international community? And if it does, is there anything that can be done on that front on the part of the international community or the United Nations or those supervising bodies that talk about democracy, the human rights and all that, when there has been such a scam with the democratic exercise within a country? Is there any mechanism? Shouldn't it come under scrutiny and something should be done about it?
Definitely it should come under scrutiny, but the present day world order we are witnessing, which we see now, we don't see any scrutiny of any of the perpetrators or any of the violators. We have seen recently in Gaza what's happening in Gaza, and now the International Court of Justice has issued the warrant against the Israeli Prime Minister, but we will see, will it be done, will it be implemented? So this is it's a different world when it comes to implementation of these things. Yes, the human rights bodies, the other think tanks, they are raising the questions on the conduct of these elections, the way BJP is conducting its election campaign. They are raising questions on this, and also they have already written, it will be, if the Modi gets third term, it will be a departure from the democracy. And also it has been alluded by some of the political scientists that BJP will, as Mr. Wasi already said, they are not abided by the constitution. They are going to amend the constitution in a way now then India will no more be an Indian Republic of India, it will be a Hindu democratic state.
Hindu Rashtra.
Hindu Rashtra.
Right. On the other hand, it actually accuses the Congress of, trying to change the constitution and robbing the people of India from the reservation and give it to Muslims. Isn't it ironic in itself?
These are political statements in order to get the votes of the scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and also the Hindu fanatics. And that's what they have to do, what they are doing on, that is their theory to the way they countered the Congress in India. And also in India, unfortunately, the other parties which are there, they are the parties of regional parties, they don't have any the national say, and that the BJP takes advantage of all those things and they march on their own. And the problem, again, one more problem is that the India alliance, they don't have a common agenda to say against Modi and his party and all that, and at different things, there seems that all the Indian political parties are in alliance with those things, and they don't want to criticize Modi on those things.
No common agenda for the India alliance. I'll come back to you to take your understanding regarding as why these 26 political parties couldn't actually forge that very consensus to have that common agenda. Mr. Mir, talking about the role and the responsibility of the oversight body for this so-called largest democratic exercise in the world's history, the Election Commission of India. What's your understanding? Does it hold any credibility? And if yes, shouldn't it be actually implementing or trying to ensure the enforcement of the code of conduct when it comes to the rampant hate speech and the narrative built upon that by the Bharatiya Janata Party? And on the other hand, if you don't believe that there is any credibility associated with the Election Commission of India, shouldn't this entire democratic exercise come under international scrutiny?
It won't. It'll never be. Because India, there's a lot of heavy investment of Indians overseas, and there's a lot of heavy investment of foreigners in India. Don't forget, there are nearly about 11 CEOs of Indian origin who run the top companies in the world. Then, of course, we've got so much of, business interests of international, companies in India, particularly in Bangalore, the IT industry, that no one will speak about it because it's all about economic interests. So basically, the Indians, yes, they have one policy, whether it is Indian National Congress or BJP or anybody else who come in, they'll maintain that policy. But at this present moment in time, the headlock or the deadlock which remains between the BJP and the electorate is the important factor. Who will break it? Who will come out and do the expose? And that expose can only be done through a vote. So through a vote, who's going to come out and do that? So as long as you have some sort of a say, like I said before, in the parliament, then of course, then there is a position that you can talk about. Then your questions become absolutely valid. But at this present moment in time, whatever it is, whether it is a sham democracy, whatever it is, it will only be accepted by the rest of the world on the figures which were seen in the assembly or the presence in the assembly. So this is a difficult time, as far as, for human rights are concerned. I keep on, hammering. We've had discourses in Brussels, in the EU, at the Kashmir Center, Jawad, where we have, tried to explain it to the Indian counterparts. We've had lots of good people who come along and, address this matter in the European Union. And of course, we've had, Jawad, 42 members, 42 countries, members of them have sat down at the discourses, on Kashmir. But at the end of the day, nothing really comes out of it. We've explained the genocide. We've explained that, the mass graves, pregnant women being bayoneted and all that. We've explained everything there. And we tried so much. Indian lobby is so strong. It was successful in closing down the Kashmir Center in Brussels, successful in Washington, and whatever it remains in London is literally nondescript. So we've got to, first of all, come out with a sound plan, a consistent plan, where we can project our viewpoint of view and the Kashmiri viewpoint. There is nothing, which represents Kashmir. Let me tell you that now. Nothing at all. All we talk about Kashmir is in your program, my program, this program, that program. That's about it. We've got to be talking on these issues internationally. That is where your question becomes valid, and we can highlight, look, this is what India is doing. Are you supporting this? We don't do it. And any other country, does it do it? No one does it. Even Palestinians don't do it about Kashmir. Let's be honest about it. No Muslim country talks about Kashmir. Let's be very honest and frank about it. So what we need to be doing is evolving and developing our own policies. And if we want to counter India, we've got to counter head on, not sitting on the back foot as we did. And 370 and 35A comes into effect because we sit on the back foot. We've got to be on the front foot to fight this cause on a long-term basis and expose India of its atrocities which are being committed in the name of democracy. That, I'm sorry to say, Jawad, we don't do it. And we've got to wake up at some point. Are we going to wake up when the water issue becomes a little bit more, tough? Are we going to do that? Are we going to do that if there is, let's say, even a little bit more violent, scene in the line on the line of control? Are we going to do that now? No. Diplomacy has to start now. This is the period we've got to, start diplomacy. And then in the same breath, we do something, they'll tell us, okay, we'll do it. And, we can come up to some arrangements. But our diplomatic circle is weak. and that has to be strengthened. Policies have to be reviewed, and of course, people who represent, as far as Kashmir is concerned, or Pakistan's foreign policies are concerned, we need to have people who can speak eloquently, who can explain Pakistan's viewpoint. That is the way forward.
A point well taken. Mr. Mir, as far as I remember, after the revocation of Article 370 on 5th of August back in 2019, we saw this particular issue being raised at the United Nations Security Council twice after that. We also saw there was a talk about India's unilateral and illegal actions when we talk about the European Parliament. Even this issue was brought up for discussion in the UK's Parliament at that time. Also at the international organizations, even including the Amnesty International, different other international organizations, the Genocide Watch also talking about the high likely possibility of genocide being perpetrated by Indian regime over there. So that issue was right away highlighted at the international level, and much to the credit of the diplomatic community of Pakistan, spread across the world at that particular time. Perhaps if you say that more diplomacy needs to be brought in, there has to be a review of the policies. Perhaps after that particular time, the pace of that might have reduced, but this particular issue still remains highlighted at the international front. What else do you think should be done when it comes to the role and the responsibility of the diplomatic community, especially when we talk about any probability if the BJP comes into power for the third consecutive term, keeping in view the future fate of the innocent people in IIOJK?
Jawad, to your question, brief answer. Get the right people for the right job. And I suggested to the previous government that, as far as Kashmir is concerned, please have former foreign secretaries who are well versed with this issue and who can go and talk on your behalf to the rest of the world. But no, what we do is we appoint people who know nothing about Kashmir, nothing, even ministers, nothing. I mean, we had one minister in the previous government who didn't even probably know the ABC of Kashmir or the problem of it. So the question is, you've got to have people who are competent and who can speak about the issue. That is how you move forward. And what we do is we don't, because we appoint somebody for a short term, and then in the meantime there is total chaos in the whole system. Nobody knows, from head to toe, and that is how we move on. I've seen it. I've seen it before, and I've been on visits to Washington or to UK. So what we need, to your basic question, is get the right people for the right job. Right. Get those people who understand the issue, who can explain the issue to their counterparts. And once you do that, you create a lobby. And when you create a lobby, then there is some sort of a movement who can even, take the cases onto the respective governments, and that is where you come forward. We don't do that. Have you ever done some sort of a paper, a nicely presented paper on Kashmir? I'm sorry, none. Just pamphlets and things like that. Let's get our act together. Let's, strengthen our case on a variety of subjects. Are we talking about the water crisis, which is going to be coming in the future? No. Are we going to be talking when it does happen? Yes, that is when we'll do it. Okay, we are lastminute.com. We've got to be proactive.
A quick comment regarding as to any sort of chance of the resumption of dialogue between Pakistan and India in case BJP comes for the third term.
We have to have a dialogue with India. We have no choice. We've got to have a dialogue with India. Peace is the answer. Wars, atrocities on any side is not the answer.
And what Wars about the Indian side, Mr. Mir? Respectfully, what about the Indian side? It's been Pakistan always being desirous of getting into negotiations and resolving the disputes with India through amicable means. But it was India which shied away from dialogue and negotiations on the table. What about that side?
That is the reason they created this unrest in Azad Kashmir. I completely suspect that whatever happened there has been instigated by some foreign element. And it'll be unfair of me to blame India, but who else can I blame? So they will try everything to dismantle you. They'll try everything to, discourage you through talks and all that. But we've got to continue harping on one line: talk, talk, and complete talk, and that is the way forward.
Right. Let me see, Dr. Wasi, quickly regarding as to the fate of Kashmiris in case BJP comes into power, and what about the sole constituency of Ladakh that voted in this fifth phase of the elections?
You know, the resumption of India-Pakistan dialogue, unfortunately, I don't see any prospect if BJP comes again into power. But regarding this Ladakh elections, these Lok Sabha elections, even when they were held earlier, people even now they are taking part into that. So we should not construe it that they have reposed their confidence or they are akin to self-determination. They are two different things. And especially after 2008, they have clearly distinguished it, that these are issues for the local day-to-day problems, and it has nothing to do with the larger issue of self-determination. So I think that that should not be linked with that, and that cannot, this election or their participation or even better turnout cannot dilute their fundamental question and their quest for freedom.
Right. Mr. Wani, what does this election hold for Kashmiris and the people of Ladakh, especially the sole constituency of Ladakh voted in today's phase, and one of the 5 constituencies from Kashmir also?
No, today Baramulla, Kopara constituency, they voted today.
One out of 5 of the Kashmiris also.
Kashmir, that was one. But as Dr. Wasi said, these elections will not change on the legal basis of the Kashmir dispute. Neither the people of Kashmir have abandoned their struggle against Indian occupation. If you see, I'll give one simple example. So there are some candidates with whom Indian government, Indian military and all others are, and they are supporting them in these elections. And while there is another candidate who is in the prison and he is contesting the election. But in order to show the dissent, the people found their way of coming out in large numbers in his election campaign voluntarily. That election campaign was run by the youth in the whole of the constituency. They were not paid by anyone, they paid from there. That was this sign the Kashmiris showed that this is how we show our resilience, our resistance against the occupation. So that's Kashmiris. It has injected into the now the 5th generation of Kashmiris now, so there's nothing to worry for that.
Mr. Altaf, Hussain, Wani, Chairman, Kashmir Institute of International Relations, thank you very much for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Dr. Awais Bin Wasi, Indian Affairs expert, joining us in the studio. Thank you very much for your time also. And on Skype, we were honored to have been joined by Mr. P.J Mir, senior journalist. Mr. Mir, thank you very much for taking time out for Views on News tonight. Really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of today's episode. Till the next one, take good care of yourselves.